Hello, friends. How are you today? So, I have been really busy reading lots of really good content in terms of books. So, I'm so excited to tell you about my next book read. It just came out a month ago and I couldn't wait because I love this author's story. I became familiar with Jacinda Ardern a few years ago. And when I heard that she was writing a book, I couldn't wait to read the book. So, here's her book. It's called A Different Kind of Power. And if you don't know her, you should. She is the former prime minister of New Zealand. Now, I say that and you're like, oh, yeah, that's fantastic. She's great. But she was the 40th prime minister, the youngest prime minister ever to take office at 37 years old. Not the first woman. She's amongst three women to be prime minister. But as you walk through this story and her story, you learn that she came from a very rural town. She came from a happy family. Her dad was a civil servant. He actually was the head. He worked his way up to become the head of police in the small town that she grew up in. Came from dairy farmers in her family, worked the farm with her family overall. And then you see through her journey that civil servant really mentality embedded in her to the point that she got the political bug early in her life. In fact, her grandmother was a volunteer, campaign volunteer, and whatnot. So she served as a really good example. I have some of that in my history too. And so maybe that's why I gravitate a lot to her, is because my grandmother was a very big volunteer with the Veterans Association and the Veterans Auxiliary for Women. And then she brought me along. In fact, I joke around, that's my first sales job ever, was selling poppies, these little plastic poppies that the veterans used to make, but we'd sell them on Memorial Day and on Veterans Day. She'd scoop me up out of school and I'd go to the little town that I grew up in, the courthouse, and I'd sell, 8, 9, 10 years old, out of school, selling these poppies, and I loved it. It was a great way for me to learn how to approach strangers really early on in my life. But back to Jacinda. So you walk through her journey, you walk through that political bug in her veins in terms of really like her wanting to do this. And then you see her become prime minister. What you also see is that she had been trying to have a baby. So she becomes prime minister and finds out she's pregnant within weeks of one another. And then you see her take on this different kind of power. Her father actually discouraged her from getting into politics. He thought she was too thin skinned. And so he thought that she was too prone to taking on people's criticisms too much. And she addresses that and her imposter experiences and imposter thoughts quite a bit in her book. In fact, when she became an MP, she actually talks about a journey that she had with an experience that she had with someone who was like a bulldog kind of guy. And she wanted to be tough like him. And she went to him and she asked him, she's like, I want to be tough like you. I want to do this. And he said, don't ever do that. Don't ever change who you are. You have to show up as authentic as you can be because that's what makes the connection. And so that's the reason why she calls it a different kind of power. And as you walk through her story, you learn all of the difficulties that she had when she took office in terms of the balance of her family life and her political life, but also the political life in terms of what the country was going through, fires and floods and the pandemic and everything else. And she did it extremely well. She was a leader extremely well. And her very last address that she had to Parliament was that we can all lead. It's a great message. We can all lead from whatever seat we're sitting in. It doesn't matter if you're this or you're that or you're this or you're that, you can lead if you really know who you are. And that's what she stands for. So it's one of the topics that I address and I have been addressing in my webinar, Imposter to Empowered. The I before E, except after C. Imposter comes before empowered, except whenever you have some confidence. And so it's been one of those great topics. Her story is one of those great emphasis points that I have whenever I have been making that, when I have been telling that tale specific to that webinar. So if you have any questions about that, if you have your own imposter journey, I'd love to hear from you. I have my own. We all have our own, I believe. Studies show that 70% of us have imposter thoughts. And anytime we're stretched, anytime we're trying to do something that we've never done before, that's when those little thoughts start to come up. Am I good enough? What if they find out? What if they find out that I'm not as good as they think I am? There's all of that and more, but there are tips and techniques and tactics to get you on the other side. You take good care, and I will see you soon.